Welcome to Inner Peace with Dr. Reese, a program that can help you become liberated in the modern world. Now, here's your host, Dr. Kevin W. Reese.
Have you ever hit rock bottom? And have you ever been addicted to something? And what was it that dragged you out of that? Welcome to episode number 56. Today I have the honor of speaking to Chris Grosso. He's a published author, public speaker, and mental health counselor. But before he became this spiritual teacher, he was an alcoholic, an addict, and he reached lows that, like he says in the podcast, he doesn't wish on anybody. Also an atheist, one day he was introduced to the Eastern traditions, the wisdom traditions. This changed everything. He was introduced to a book that changed his life, and eventually he came face to face with the great Ram Dass. He was moved to tears, and things just progressed from there. I can't wait for you to hear his story. It's an inspiration. Chris, welcome to the Peace Podcast. Hello.
I am really honored to be here, Kevin. Thank you.
Going back, you were an addict many years ago, correct?
Yeah.
So how did you, first of all, what were you addicted to?
Boy, what wasn't I addicted to? To be honest, people ask me, like, how long have you been clean? And I used to count clean time, and I understand the importance of that when it comes to drugs and alcohol. And, you make these milestones, especially if you're early to recovery. I think that's great. But for me, I went through many years of being clean for a few years and then relapsing and, jails and emergency rooms and terrible experiences. And what I've recognized is, one, it wasn't just the drugs or the alcohol. Those are just symptoms. It's an obsessive compulsive disorder that I'm dealing with. So even though I haven't touched drugs or alcohol in a while now, but I will still catch myself acting out with, like, food, for example. I'll go into the kitchen. If I'm not hungry,
Right.
I'm still doing the same thing. I'm just replacing it's the substance, So, but anyways, yeah. So my main thing, though, like the most detrimental, was alcohol first and foremost, and then really, what else do you have? I didn't care. So
that's very powerful what you just said. A lot of people don't quite get that it's an obsession and it can move from one thing to the other. And I see so many people do this with diets.
Yeah.
Being in the nutrition world for a long time, I'd see somebody do like excessive, paleo or Atkins, right? And then boom, all the way to the other side, all fruit. Then boom, all the way to breatharianism. Then boom, all the way to nothing but steak. And then boom, all the way to nothing but apples. It's like they're just banging from this side to that side to this side. And then I talk to them. I get their story. And go figure, in their past, they might have been an alcoholic, or they might have been addicted to opioids, pain reliever. This is an obsessive compulsive thing. And that's powerful what you just said.
Thanks. The other side of it, this is something I've written about in one of my books, but I don't know if you're familiar with Thomas Keating. He was a Christian mystic, passed away not that long ago. Beautiful man. I had interviewed him about 10 years ago. And when I was talking with him, I don't remember how it came up, but I mentioned, that I'm in recovery. And he chuckled a little bit, not like in a malicious way, just a harmful laugh. And I was like, why is Thomas Keating laughing at me? I was all like, oh no. But he said in a very playful way, he's like, well, I'm in recovery too. And before he started there, I'm like, whoa, I didn't know Father Keating had a habit, like, that's crazy. But no, he goes on to say, I'm in recovery from the human condition and the varying degrees to which we all suffer.
Mm.
And that was really powerful for me because, similar to what I was sharing about addiction, same with recovery. You know, we all have our addictions. We're all in recovery from something. And, you know, it's nice to see that some of the stigma is starting to lessen around addiction. I mean, there's plenty of work to do, but I think if people recognize that, if they were open-minded, maybe they'd have a little more compassion or sensitivity and recognize it's not a moral failing. It's not a weak will. It's really a disorder, you know, and we all suffer from it to a certain extent in our own way. So it's not like someone who's not addicted to alcohol or drugs is any better than someone who is. It's like, okay, well, what are you addicted to? You know,
That's
we've all
right.
got something. So,
And for some people, it's ambition. It's
sure.
their business.
Yeah.
Rest in peace, Kobe Bryant. But
Yeah.
I once heard in an interview, they were asking him about his new media empire that he was creating. And they were like, well, what's your trick to hiring people? And he goes, oh, I just find obsessive people.
So makes sense. And that's Kobe, you know, he crushed it.
He was obsessed with basketball completely.
Yeah.
And
even spirituality, not to cut you off, but like,
yes.
I will be the first to throw myself under the bus and say that I've used meditation as a form of aversion. You know, I've done mantras because I didn't want to be in my body and feel what I was feeling. You know, like it was complete, as Trungpa Rinpoche talked about, spiritual materialism. You know, it was, you know, my heart was in the right place, but the intention wasn't. And that's, you know, something I had to learn, and I'm grateful that I did. And it's kind of a rite of passage, I think, for most people that end up on a path. So, you know, it is what it is. But people don't think about that. Like yoga, things that can be truly great for us and can also just be another way of dropping out and not being with our experience in the moment. So we've got to be really careful about that. I have to be really careful with that, at least.
Yeah. And I guess a recovering food addict, if you will. It never goes away. Yeah. It never goes away, really. Yeah. And so you have to stay away from the triggers. Yeah. You know, can't open up a bag of chips.
I know. You know, can't have it in the apartment. That's for me. Like,
yeah, because, you know, one trigger will lead to a whole week long binge.
I will again throw myself under the bus. I'm very transparent, Kevin. Yeah. And, you know, as you know, and we were talking earlier, I've had to reschedule this a couple of times because I've been dealing with a severe stenosis and a herniated disc over the last year. And, you know, prior to that, I was running like 8 to 12 miles a day, 5-6 days a week, not obsessively, but, you know, that for me is part of my recovery, and weight training and things. You know, I enjoy that. It's cathartic for me. Actually, 2 of my 3 books were predominantly written while I was out running. You know, after I hit the 5-mile mark, it comes to me. Right. But I ended up getting this herniated disc, and I have not been able to run for a year. And I've even eating as well as I can, I don't have a good metabolism, and I've put on easily like 40 pounds over this, and it's tough, you know, like I have to balance right now the fact that I'm doing everything I can. I just bought a road bike for my birthday, and so I've been getting out and doing some cycling and easing back into that, and hopefully that'll help, you know, with the healing. But it's tricky, you know. I'm just mentioning because the food thing, when I was a kid, that was my first addiction, food, and I didn't have the context to recognize it, but the warning signs were there for what was to come. So
that's right.
Yeah.
And I know that feeling. It recently happened to me last year. I was sitting on the floor on a meditation cushion, and I was reading, and then all of a sudden the whole right side of my back tensed up, and it came around my shoulder and to my chest, and it popped, like pop. And from that point on, I had an injured sternum. The doctors didn't know what was wrong. You know, the only thing close to it would be a costochondritis, you know, diagnosis. And I was on my way to a Zen monastery, and I made a decision not to go because of this injury. And, you know, I stopped working out because of it. And just like you, I put on 40 pounds, dude. Just like that. And that's after I lost my I lost 80 pounds back in the day.
Yeah, same. Yep.
So when you see yourself getting bigger after the big release you already have, it's like a uh-oh type of thing. Like, uh-oh, here we go again. Wait a second.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
So I feel you, man. But you'll be fine. You know exactly what to do.
Finding the balance of like not becoming the victim, as Caroline Myss called it, the woundology, like this is who I am. No, it's an experience I'm having. And yeah, it's not pleasant, but I don't have to, feed completely into that. And yes, with the right mindset and taking an integral approach to what I'm doing, I trust that it will work itself out. It's been a year, and it's been a tough year, but talk about grace. I have a friend in New York who's a wonderful publicist, and she connected me with one of her authors. You might know him. I don't know. His name's Dr. David Hanscom. He was a spinal surgeon, and he has 2 great books out, and he completely flips the script on how people work with and heal through chronic pain. And so I had a really nice talk with him yesterday. I'm reading his books now, and just out of the kindness of his heart, because we had a mutual friend. So he is going to work with me over the next month and hopefully get me like really, really into this healing thing. So yeah, man, it's good things happen if you're doing the right thing. I found that sometimes not as soon as we'd like, but it works out.
Right on. What was the aha moment that you had back in the day to kick the drugs, the alcohol, and all that?
Yeah, that's a good one.
Did you hit rock bottom, as they call it?
Sure. And then the bottom gave out, I've gone to depths that, I wouldn't wish on anyone. There's a quote that's dear to me from Hunter S. Thompson, the very crazy writer who I love. And I don't remember verbatim, but it's talking about the edge. And he's like, the only people that will ever fully understand it are those who have been there. And it's really, when I think about the places I've been and just the traumatic experiences that I brought on myself, yes, I have I don't know that people call it a disease, people call it an illness. It's semantics to me. I live with something that, I can't control, whatever you care to call it. And so yes, that's part of it, but I also play a part in that too. And it just, the places I've had a hand in allowing myself to go in my life is not easy for me to sit with, though, I've done a lot of trauma-based therapy and taken the right steps to work through that and continue to work through it. But getting back to your question, I don't know that there was one aha moment. I've had those for sure, but I didn't get sober and then stay sober. As I was saying before, it was, I got sober and I had 14 months clean at first. And then I was literally in Rome on my birthday, and hey, when in Rome, right? It's been 14 months. I can do this. And no, I couldn't, it just turned right back into full blown, and I ended up in another emergency room when I got back to the States, or a jail cell, or a detox. I don't know. But what I do know is each time, I would go through that process which was awful, going, waking up in whatever, not remember how I got there, and then ending up back in a rehab. I was dedicated to getting well. There's always been something inside of me that wouldn't let me give up. And so there was a lot of seeds being planted. There was, I had a college professor who, during part of this, one of my periods of sobriety, I went to school for substance abuse counseling, and she's the one who actually introduced me to spirituality. I'll never forget that I went into her room because she was also my, what are they called? I don't know, whenever you're choosing your classes, it's been a long time since I've been in school. But I was in her office and she was helping me choose my classes for the next semester. And I remember looking up at her wall and I saw a Ganesh and a Mary and a Krishna and, and a Buddha. And I kind of look up there, and I was quite atheist in my ways up to this point. I did not like the idea of God, hated it. And so I go, what's going on up there? And she's like, well, what do you mean? And I said, don't you pick one and go? And she just kind of laughed, and she's like, no, she's like, you can, but you don't have to. And so anyways, she was my catalyst. And and I'm forever grateful to her, because she said to me later on after that, I was going through a breakup with a girlfriend, and she'd become very motherly to me. She's still like a friend. I haven't talked to her in a while, but she's, we've stayed in touch. And she, we were sitting on a bench at the college, and she said, if I bring a book for you, we had a class in 2 days together, would you read it? And I hated reading at the time too. Boy, how times change. Like, that's my favorite thing to do now.
Yeah.
But, I begrudgingly said, okay. And this is like, I don't know, back in 2005, give or take, maybe before that. And she comes in and gives me The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. Mm-hmm. And this is pre-Oprah. This is, he wasn't like a household name yet. And
right.
And I mentioned that because I was so punk rock and against anything. I wouldn't have read it, honestly, if he was just who he was now. But I will tell you that I took that book home that night, and I read the introduction sitting on the couch in my apartment. And by the time I finished that, I knew my life would never be the same again.
It's a great catalyst book.
Yeah.
A great beginner's book.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's Zen. He's talking about Zen, essentially.
Absolutely. Right. And that's what I appreciated, being so like just anti anything. Like, I didn't even know the difference between religion and spirituality. I thought they're the same, and it's just a crutch and whatever. But, my professor helped me learn the difference. And then what resonated with Tolle's approach is that he was referencing different wisdom traditions. It wasn't just about Christ, and he's talking about A Course in Miracles and Buddha and Rumi and all these different wisdom teachers. Mm-hmm. And it was just further confirming what my professor was telling me about, like, you don't have to just pick one. Like, you can, but you don't have to. And that made it more open to me. It wasn't like a concrete, rigid thing, and because that's something I've never resonated with. And so that's how things started.
It sounds like you, just like me and many others, were anti-religion and probably caught up in the Western traditions, which are obviously Judaism, Christianity, and Islam.
Right. Yeah.
And not realizing that there's a Hinduism, there's a Buddhism. Like, we heard of it, but never really looked into it and never really understood, that you're not your body.
Yes. And that was it. Totally. It was the thoughts actually first for me. You're not your thoughts. And I was like, well, wait a minute. If I'm not my thoughts, who am I? And then, yes, you're not your body. And it just progressed and went deeper and deeper. But so that's what I meant when I said, like, I knew my life would never be the same. Because when I read that, it was like I was remembering something that I've known all along, but just had set aside and forgotten, and it was incredible.
Yeah, similar with me, man. I ended up at an ashram and ended up rooming with a mystic. And
oh, how cool is that?
My life was forever changed,
Yeah.
Once you run into somebody, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but once you run into somebody who, we'll use the word, has elevated, who has dissolved their ego, and they're just, it's a different vibe.
Oh, that's I mean, I know we talked about maybe talking about Ram Dass, and that's the first experience I had of that was I'd had like non-dual experiences, and meditation brought me to transcendental states, and of course I had terrible experiences too. Like, I thought, oh, I'm going to meditate, everything's going to be love and light and beautiful, and sure, those experiences happened, but my goodness, like the ugliness that I had just been suppressing, it opened the floodgates. And in retrospect, I'm grateful, but I warn people when I teach now, like, I'm not trying to turn them away, but just be aware that it's not like the McMindfulness that is presented a lot of the time. It gets muddy. And if it's not getting muddy, then you might want to reevaluate, what you're reading, what you're doing.
I compare it to detox.
Beautiful. I've never heard that before, but wow, that's poignant.
It's detox. I mean, my PhD and my background is in detoxing people to overcome chronic illnesses and whatnot. And so I've seen some things, rashes, parasites,
Oh, yeah.
And then when I got into the spiritual side of things, I was like, wow, the mind really detoxes. It just, all this stuff comes out, you know? And for those listening that don't understand, you know, Jesus, the Christ, went through this, right? When he was in the desert and he had to come face to face with the devil. And also Gautama the Buddha went through this when he was underneath the Bodhi tree and he was faced with Mara, which you could consider the Eastern version of the devil. Just imagine what the Zen monks go through when they're sitting there staring at a wall for hours and hours and hours.
Yeah. I can't, you know, I've read the stories of people that have done that. And, you know, for me, I've never even done like a 10-day retreat, to be honest, like the Vipassana ones.
Yeah.
It's like, I have so much respect for people that do that, but I've never felt called to do it. And sure, maybe part of it's because I am scared to do it. I don't know, but I just, I have so much respect. That's all I can say. But man, I can't imagine.
Yeah. Yeah. So you get introduced to Eastern traditions by this counselor, this professor.
Yeah.
And you read The Power of Now.
Yep.
And you're off.
So luckily for me,
you said you're obsessive, so I'm imagining you went down the rabbit hole.
Well, if anybody can see obsessive, like I'm literally head to toe tattooed, like talk about addictions, like Anyway, so with spirituality though, I was lucky in the sense that I had a wonderful library that was like 2 blocks from where I was living at the time. So I would skateboard over there pretty much every day. And they had an incredible spirituality section. Also, which I would later get interested in things like physics and neuroscience and whatnot. So they had a great section there too. But I'm starting with, I go in and I'm just, you know, walking around. I don't know what I'm looking for. I just want to find Eastern traditions. And I come across Be Here Now. And aside, I mean, before I go deeper into that, you know, I take that out and that changes my life, you know, obviously. But, and I mean, obviously for anyone who's read my work. But aside from that, it was anything that I could get my hands on was for the most part resonating in one way or another. What didn't matter the tradition. There was so many, as long as it's more of like the mystic elements, I was finding so much truth that made sense and resonated with me, whether it was people like Thich Nhat Hanh, which is a really wonderful user-friendly Zen teacher, or the heavier stuff like Ramakrishna, or, you know, of course, Autobiography of a Yogi was a great read, but then going deeper. It just all resonated in one way or another. Not all of it resonated, but all of it had something that resonated in one way or another, whether it was mystic Christianity, it did, you know, Kabbalah. But yeah, so I'm just literally taking like stacks of books out at a time. And yes, very obsessively reading. And I was very much in the doing phase at that point, which I now, many, many years later, it's more about being, not doing. A little of both, but
that's right.
I couldn't get enough of it, you know, and I also took out, and I would love to talk about this too, the Ken Wilber's Cosmic Consciousness. It was a 12 CD set where he has a conversation with Tammy Simon, who is the founder of Sounds True, who published my second book. And there's a fun little story we can get into about that later, but that was a big one for me too. So I would say that audio program and Be Here Now. And I consider, you know, Ram Dass and Ken Wilber easily my 2 root teachers for sure. Like they're wonderful.
Okay. So if you're reading Be Here Now, then you're being introduced to the guru-disciple relationship.
Yes.
Very powerful stuff.
Yeah.
It's easy to relate that back to the whole Jesus culture. And kind of see where that power comes from people who are saved by Jesus, right? You know, there's not too many hardcore Christians listening to this podcast, so I think I can say that they're experiencing guru-disciple relationship, the power of that.
Sure.
But you can experience that with Jalaluddin Rumi or Yogananda or Ram Dass or Osho or whoever. And so now you come across Ram Dass. Ram Dass was big in my journey as well. Love the guy. Never met him. Very sad to hear he left his body a few months ago.
Yeah, that was
But
tough.
man, I identified with that guy quite a bit.
Yeah.
Especially having a PhD and sort of not, you know, going that route, so to speak.
Yeah.
He walked away from his career, basically.
Yeah. He resonated immediately. To me, I grew up loving punk rock and hardcore and hip hop, like outsider culture. And that's, you know, what attracted me so much to be here now. Ram Dass is punk rock, like totally punk rock. Like, you know, he had that Harvard degree. He had everything.
Yeah.
And he knew there was more in a way that was less. And, you know, that was so powerful to me. Like the non-attachment thing, the, you know, following your own truth.
So how did you meet Ram Dass? How did that happen?
A friend of mine named Jessica was doing, hosted a website called Where's My Guru? And I had been doing my own website called The Indie Spiritualist. I started in like 2010, which was just a ground for interviewing people of all different cultures and things I enjoyed. Prior to that, I'd written zines. I loved talking to people and interviewing them. So I forgot exactly how Jessica and I connected, but she asked me if I would do some guest interviews for her show. And I was like, yeah, I dug what she was doing. We resonated. And it was around the time Polishing the Mirror was coming out. And so on a whim, you know, I send an email off to the Love Serve Remember Foundation. I don't know who I'm sending it to. And I just say, hey, you know, introduce myself. I'm doing this guest series on the show. I know Polishing the Mirror is coming out. Would Ram Dass be available for an interview? And I don't know, it was like 2 or 3 days later, I get a response. I honestly didn't expect to hear back because at this time, I'm still semi-new in the journey. And these dudes are like rock stars to me, like the equivalent of like, you know, next level, like, you know, Krishna Das is like the same as like Guns N' Roses. You know, they're like larger than life.
Right.
But sure enough, I get an email back from a gentleman named Raghu Marcus, who is the head of the Love Serve Remember Foundation, a dear man. And he said, yeah, Chris, Ram Dass is available on this day at this time, if you can do that via Skype. And I remember like when I just read that, I was like floored.
It's happening.
Absolutely floored.
Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier when you're in the presence of someone, you know, elevated, use the word, where it's palpable, you feel it, you can't not feel it. Well, so I get on this Skype call, just like, you know, we're on Zoom, but it was on Skype and with Ram Dass. And so that was my first time meeting him. It wasn't in person, but immediately I felt elevated. I felt high in a way. I also felt very emotional, like, and it wasn't a starstruck emotional thing. It was, it's hard to put into words. You know, I was just taking in what he was putting out, basically what it comes down to. And my body, my physiology wasn't like ready for that. You know, it's like the Kundalini awakening for some people that don't know what that is and haven't properly prepared. Like it can be weird. But it wasn't weird. It was beautiful. And I remember at one point during the conversation, like I started tearing up, and we weren't talking about anything sad. It was like overjoyed. And I stopped and I said to him, like, you know, Ram Dass, like, why am I crying? Why am I tearing up? You know, do you know? And he's like, I forgot again verbatim, but you know, you're just seeing your true self reflected back right now. You know, isn't it beautiful? And it was beautiful, man.
Wow. There it is.
I have a great, please interject, but before we move on from that, there's a great story at the end of that, but please, if you have something to say.
No, that's the mirror, man. You know?
Yes.
That's it. We all have that potential.
Yeah.
And that's what he was saying to you.
Yes. Literally, like, and polishing the mirror, you know, how fitting that was. So what was going on though at this time? Also, I was just finished writing my first book, Indie Spiritualist. It wasn't out yet. Simon & Schuster was doing it. That in and of itself is an insane thing. But I remember wanting to ask Ram Dass if he would take a look at it and write an endorsement. but I knew his health wasn't well. It wasn't nearly as bad as it had gotten, but he'd had his stroke. And I talked to Mirabai Starr, who's in the satsang and a lifelong friend of Ram Dass, and she's like, you should ask him if you feel moved to. She's like, I know that some people have asked him recently, and he's had to say no as much as he wants to. He can't right now physically. And so I decided I'm not going to ask him. Mirabai didn't mention it to him. I left it alone. And so at the end of the conversation, I stopped recording and we were still talking, just kind of, I don't remember exactly what we were talking about, but he stops and he says to me, he goes, so you have a book coming out. Nobody except Mirabai knew this. And I know Mirabai did not tell me. I'd asked her after the fact. She's like, no. And he goes, because during the interview, I'm thinking like, maybe you should ask him. And then I'm like, no, like respect him and his physical situation. So he goes, well, if you'd like to send it over, I'd be happy to write a blurb for it. And then though, he goes, going to the guru-disciple relationship, he goes, and that comes from meeting Maharaji. And it was similar to that experience he talks about in Be Here Now, where he was out in the night sky thinking about his mother and the spleen, and Maharaji told him, like, he knew that somehow. Right. And that was a story that really like shook me. I was like, whoa, because when I read that, it's one of the first spiritual books. I'm like, I don't want anybody knowing what I'm thinking, but it was just so beautiful the way that was that story had a profound effect on me. And then in a way, a very similar thing happened, through Maharaji's grace. It was, I will never deny that stuff is possible after that. And more stuff happened, but that was the first.
And for the listeners, Maharaji is Baba Neem Karoli, who was became Ram Dass's master.
Yes. Yeah.
Guru. So.
And Ram Dass would always say right up to the end, he's just the hook on the fishing line that Maharaji's holding. He took no credit, completely, no credit.
Yeah. And that's the power of that guru disciple relationship. I heard Ram Dass say, in his last years I read it in his book. I just glanced over at my little library here, Walking Each Other Home. And he said in that book that, he plans to die with Maharaji's photo. That's all he wants.
Yeah.
He's like, that's all I need. It's just his photo in his bed. That's all I need. So I hope he got what he wanted.
I'm sure he did, because I remember when he talked in Fierce Grace, a wonderful documentary about him. And they were talking about what happened during the stroke. Was it this beautiful, euphoric experience? Not the stroke itself, but where did you go? And he's like, there was nothing. Absolutely nothing. And so, he was saying how that was, in a way, that was an act of grace from Maharaji, showing him, there's still work to be done. You're not done yet. There's still things that need cleaning up. And, how beautiful. And that's part of what's deeply inspired me in the way I write and when I teach is just full transparency, honest. And I don't want to sound negative. A lot of spirituality has become very, commercialized and just let's put it out and dumb it down. And okay, if it helps people, fine. But at the end of the day, is it really helping, or is it just like a Band-Aid? Jeff Brown, a wonderful writer, I remember he was telling me, he calls it the New Cage movement. And one of his friends got into the lighter stuff, and she had honest mental health issues. And instead of like following her doctor's advice and seeing a therapist and taking the proper medications that she needed, she's like, no, these teachers are going to heal me, that they promise they're going to, these books promise it. And she ended up committing suicide, so there are dangers. I know that's an extreme example, but it's, we just have to be careful. But that's, again, what I love about Ram Dass is there was no, like, I'm not perfect. He's like, I'm a work in progress. And same here, till the day I die, I'm a hot mess, and I'll be the first one to tell you.
Yeah. Ram Dass, one of the things that attracted me to him was he was so transparent.
Yes.
He really was. He made fun of himself.
Yeah.
He made fun of the fact that he was bisexual or gay or however you want to, whatever label you want to use.
Sure.
And he, he made fun of his Jewish heritage. He made fun of, psychedelics. I mean, everything. And he was just like the fun uncle that you just want to be around,
He absolutely was. I got to tell you, the first time I met him in person, it's a pretty funny story. It was at a retreat about 5 years ago in Hawaii, and it was after a session, and he was on stage, and Mirabai Bush, who's teaches at all of those and co-wrote Walking Each Other Home with him, also Compassion in Action, another great book. She saw me, and we're close, and I had already been doing my podcast on the Be Here Now network at that point, and so all the teachers were familiar with me, and Mirabai was on stage next to him and called me up because she knew I hadn't met him in person yet. And I don't get starstruck. Like, I've interviewed tons of famous people from all walks of life, and they're just people, right? Like, but I don't know, this was something else. So I'm like, I feel like not only that, but again, that energy that he's putting out. So I walk over and I don't say anything. Like, at first, I think he can tell as I'm walking over, like, he probably just sensed it. So I walk over and I look at him. I'm like, "Hi, Ram Dass." I thought about this moment forever. And he goes like this to me. He's in his wheelchair. And so I lean down and he grabs my goatee and he smiles. He goes, "It's so little." Because anyone who knows Ram Dass has this big beard. So Ram Dass essentially busts my chops over, my little goatee. But that was his way of just bringing me down, and because immediately he said that, I laughed, and it was like a wave came over me of just calm. And I'm like, all right, I'm just here with this incredible, beautiful human, and we only talked for a few minutes. And, but that was the first time. And what a beautiful experience, like this man that's looked at as just like, and he is like an iconic spiritual teacher. Just that's how he met me, just making fun of me in a lighthearted way. It was beautiful. Couldn't have been more perfect for me.
So, very cool. And so, how did you have more experiences with him after that?
Yeah, so that was just being there was the only time I was physically in his presence. We've done a number of Skype interviews and conversations, and I've had him on my podcast, and of course on the Be Here Now network. But so most of it was through Skype. Something that was really meaningful for me was so he endorses my first book, and then you mentioned Walking Each Other Home, which was the last book he put out before he transitioned, and he asked me to endorse that, which was a really beautiful. I think it was another Maharaji thing, like a very full circle thing. Like, he endorses my first book, I endorse his last. Like, who am I to write about why people should read Ram Dass and Mirabai? Like, I'm still just, I just turned 42, man. I'm this punk rock like weirdo that by a strange set of circumstances has some books published, but I'm no different than anyone. I just have had some fortunate life circumstances. So that was really humbling for me, and of course very meaningful. But when the book came out, they sent it, and it's like Helen Hunt and Joan Baez and all these incredibly famous people like Pete Holmes and of course Duncan Trussell and then Chris Grosso. I'm like, that does not make sense. I mean, I'd been asked to endorse a lot of books before that, but not by Ram Dass. So it was just so weird, man.
Well, how did you end up on the Be Here Now network, and how did you end up with the Simon & Schuster deal?
So yeah, two different stories. The Simon & Schuster thing happened before Be Here Now, so I'll start with that quickly. So Ram Dass and I clicked, on that interview, and we just really resonated. And so it's not like we were talking a lot, but like we stayed in touch to a certain extent. Indie Spiritualist comes out. So the way that happens, long story, try to make it short, as I mentioned, I started the Indie Spiritualist website, and it was more focused on interviews in the beginning. After that, I started writing more about my own experience for various websites like Elephant Journal, Mind Body Green, places that would accept unsolicited material. I wasn't doing so in a way that I wanted to get noticed or recognized. I was at a place in my life where it was after the last rehab I went through, like rock bottom of rock bottoms. Like I had nothing. I was unemployed for the first time in my life. Car was repossessed. Like, but I had an honest to God, like complete surrender. And I was like, whatever you, whomever you is to your listeners, that which is greater than me, whatever you want me to do, I'm still alive. I don't know how, but I'm here. I'll do. Just guide me. So start writing more. I ended up getting an email from a wonderful New York Times bestselling author and connecting with this woman, Lissa Rankin. She's a physician, a Hay House author, just a really authentic, like raw person and brilliant mind. And we really connected. And it's odd because I end up making these deep connections with people that, if we were sitting down having coffee and someone walked by, they'd probably look at us like, it's weird. I look like a weirdo, man. Like I'm covered in tattoos and big plugs. And, these are more traditionally, quote unquote, normal looking folks. So Lissa, we just bond and she had read a bunch of my stuff and she's like, you have something to say there. You have a book to write. Dude, I didn't even finish my associate's degree. Like that substance abuse counseling program, I was halfway through my internship and something was so compelling to me that is like, this is not what you're supposed to be doing. I always wanted to work with people, but I just knew this wasn't it. And the professor who I mentioned earlier, when I told her, I'm like, this doesn't feel right. She said, normally I would try to talk a student into staying. You're so close to finishing. But she's like, I know you and I know that your heart's telling you something different. So you have my blessing. Just, do what you got to do. So Lissa introduces me to her literary agent, which blows my mind. I made the mistake of looking who this agent represents, which are way bigger authors than I am. A slew of New York Times bestsellers that are the polar opposite of me, still in the well-being mindfulness genre, but not like this raw, punky dude like I am. But again, this woman reads my stuff. Her name's Michelle, and she's like another mother figure to me. And she's like, I love this. I think you have a great book inside of you, and I would like to sign you and represent you. I mean, I have, to this day, I still have a problem calling myself a writer because I've never taken a class on writing. I've never read a book about how to write. I just sit down and write raw. That's I think my gift is that I've been to so many low places in life. I'm not scared to put it out there, honestly, because there's nothing you can say that's going to affect me any worse than what I've already been through.
Right.
Aside from that, though, it's always with the intention of, I want to help other people. Like if my experiences can help and the things I've learned that have literally saved my life, that's my passion. So this woman signs me. We put a book proposal together. I'm like, wow, I'm going to be an author. This is beyond my wildest dreams. She sends it out to about 40 publishers. And after the course of maybe a week and a half or so, we get 40 rejections. Okay, I'm not going to be an author. That was fun while it lasted. But no, so she's like, let's look at the feedback from the editors that, looked at acquisitions editors and let's restructure this proposal. We did. It took about 3 months, sent it back out. And now we had a number of publishers that really wanted the book. And I ended up going with the one I felt best about. And so Indie Spirituals came out. And then, from there, I got invitations to start speaking at festivals like Wanderlust or conferences and, all these places that I couldn't even afford to go to if I wasn't being a presenter, it was so weird to me.
Right.
But so that's Indie Spiritualist. I know I've been talking for a minute. I'll tell you about the.
Did you manifest this?
I have to say, I guess in a way I did. Like
Unintentionally,
but also I'll tell you what. Like I watched The Secret, and I've read like Dr. Joe Dispenza's books. I presented at a lot of conferences with him, and I appreciate more of the scientific like approach of. We do attract things and yeah, like, it's not like I just sit down and I want a Ferrari and it's going to be out there. Like there's a lot more to it, but I can say after applying those principles in a way that, for more of I was going to say scientific, that's not the correct word, but let me say this, not so much of a woo-woo way, and no offense to anyone, just that doesn't resonate for me.
Right.
Yeah. Stuff worked. Like I would sit down, and honestly, I would imagine like the book going to the publisher and I would just send like from my heart, like a beam of light, you know, like love, and imagine it going to New York or Los Angeles or wherever the headquarters was. And I would imagine it like being received by the person that was getting the book. And, you know, I'll be honest with you, if I heard myself saying this like 25 years ago, I'd beat myself up. You know, I was not this guy. But
Right.
yeah, so yeah,
Right.
I in a way I did. I think though it was the surrender more than anything, the willingness to just do whatever I could for the greater good of others. And I didn't know what that would look like. Like I said, I didn't intend to write a book, let alone 3. You know, and I didn't intend to be on the Be Here Now network. Like, you know, here I'm 5 years doing that show. And the way that came about was just simply like after Indie Spirituals came out, and Raghu, who I mentioned earlier from Love Serve Remember, we were talking about something. I think I had another interview or a call with Ram Dass. I don't know. And you know, Indie Spirituals was doing well, and I think Everything Mind was in the works, which sounds true. And he knew about that, and he's like, well, you know, why don't you do a podcast? And because he knew like about my website and I love to interview people, and I was like, I don't know, I never did one. He's like, think about it. We're starting a network, and if you know you're interested, I think you'd be a great fit. Another one of those like, how do I have any business like doing this? Because like when Be Here Now launched, it was a platform of Ram Dass, Krishna Das, Sharon Salzberg, Jack Cornfield, Lama Surya Das, Raghu Marcus, and me. You know, so you have all of these like amazing, like illumined teachers and just, you know, iconic spiritual figures. And I'll never forget when they sent me like the social media picture, you know, with all of our faces and Be Here Now network. And I'm looking at all these people, and then there's me. And it's like, you know, I don't get it. But I've learned that I don't have to get it. I just go with the flow. So it was just simply like, I don't know, there was something there, and they invited me, and here I am 5 years later, like still doing the show, absolutely loving it. And it's so humbling to be a part of that family, you know, because like I said, Ram Dass is like, that lineage is my root, like along again with like Ken Wilber. But those are the 2 teachers and paths that really just saved my life, you know. And I know I'm not sounding, you know, non-dual right now because there is no me. I know that, but you know, keeping it real about the human experience, it saved not ego. It saved physical form, Chris, the manifest form of Chris's life. So
Yeah, cool, man. That's really cool stuff. How it just all kind of happened. Can you shed light on what you teach people as far as mental health goes?
My approach is just very much pure based. I don't have a degree. Like I said, I'm transparent. I teach from the school of direct experience, and I make it very clear that all I can offer, and I don't care if someone has a degree or not, like really all we have to offer when it comes to this kind of stuff is what we've been through, you know, and that truth. So I make it very clear that, and that's why I take an approach similar to Ram Dass or Eckhart. Like when I present things, I draw from different wisdom traditions, but I also draw from music and contemporary culture, pop culture, as a way to, you know, try to get that in with them. So they're actually, I wouldn't say excited, but at least open to meditating and talking about mindfulness and doing different breath exercises and other healing things. So I take just a really eclectic approach to it. You know, sometimes I'll go in intentionally not planning something for the day and just feel the room each session and go wherever it's supposed to. And I actually do that with most talks I do, you know, at Wanderlust or wherever. I just go up and whatever comes up comes out. You know, I find that to me, that's where the real truth will come from. And I always say a quick prayer before I do anything, you know. I just close my eyes and to whatever's better, not better, greater than me, simply like, please help me to lay myself aside so that I'm the faucet through which your water of wisdom and grace can flow through. You know, the words change a little, but that's the sentiment. And, you know, within 1 or 2 minutes, like, I feel like, yeah, I've subsided, and I'm not saying I'm channeling anything, but I feel like it helps me get in the flow of whatever needs to come out in that moment and be said. And I'll tell you, it's intimidating because I've done it in front of audiences of like 2,000 people, and people are like, you're crazy, you know, like you're going to go up there and give a 20-minute talk and not prepare. And but again, it's like, what do I have to lose? You know, like
Right.
this is such a gift that I have right now. Like every day is a gift. Like I don't want to die, but if I die tomorrow, like I have no right to complain, you know, because the way I lived, there are a number of times I used to say I should have died, but you know, I'm still here, so I shouldn't have, but I could have died. So every day is a gift, even if it's a rough day. And I will say I'm not always grateful every minute of every day. Like I'm a human, but I do know, you know, and that's always there underlying is it's all a gift. It really is. So, and that's a big thing I definitely teach is gratitude. You know, I know it's done to death, but there's a reason. It's so important.
Hmm.
So yeah.
It really is. Even if we can just stop for a second, if we're feeling down or
Yeah,
disappointed, if we just stop and just count your blessings, just
absolutely.
these, I have this, I have that, I have
Yeah,
this, I have that, and
yeah.
this is really cool. And that's enough.
I mean, yeah, like, dude, I've been experiencing chronic pain for this last year, and I know people have experienced it way worse and for way longer. So I don't want to take away from that, but even experiencing that, which is brutal, really terrible, I have a roof over my head. I'm sitting on a couch. I'm in a relatively safe place right now. I have a bed to sleep in. I have a bathroom that I can use, a shower. I have running water. I have food to eat. Like, what right do I have to complain? You know, like, I mean, yeah, things aren't perfect. They never will be. But there are so many people right now that don't have that. And not even in third world countries. Right here in the US, there are people right now just living on the streets that, you know, maybe they're literally dying. Maybe they're going through withdrawals. Maybe they're strung out. Maybe they just had a really rough, you know, hand of cards dealt to them in life. And you know, they didn't catch a break and they don't have a roof over their head and they're sleeping on the street and don't know where their next meal is coming from. Like that's the reality of also what's happening in life. You know, the grace and the grit, as Ken Wilber would say. It's two sides of the same coin.
Hmm. What is the name of your next book going to be?
So, so all right, I'm actually working on two books right now. I haven't really talked to you about this, so you're getting a little exclusive. But so I'm co-writing two books right now. One of them is with a wonderful staff writer at Fangoria, and that's the one where I was talking about we're taking each chapter and using a. He also has a degree in psychology, and so we're looking at the psychology as well as like what we can learn for wellness with these characters, chapter by chapter. That book is called Necessary Death, and that's based off of the title of a song from a band I love, one of my friends' bands, End, and that I just love that. So we're running with that. I have an Eckhart Tolle quote in the beginning next to, you know, some like John Carpenter quotes, but where he talks about, you know, we need to die before we die in order to really live. So necessary death just fit. The other book I'm doing is with the drummer of this band called Taking Back Sunday. Anybody familiar with like, you know, rock, indie rock? They're as big as it gets. Like they're headlining with Smashing Pumpkins and stuff when concerts start again. But that's the status they're at. And he's a friend that I've connected through music, and he had this vision for a kid's book about drumming and the love of drumming. And so we've come together on that, and we're actually working with a gentleman who used to work on Shel Silverstein's books, who's helping us just flush that out. And so that book's tentatively called I Love Drums, but you know, I'm not sure what it's going to be, but I'm so excited about both. And again, I think that speaks to, again, staying open on our path and our process. Like I'm writing a horror book which with the intention of well-being, and a kid's book at the same exact time, you know,
Right.
and it's a beautiful and wonderful diverse experience. I love it.
Is the literary agent that you manifested many years ago still working with you on all this?
Absolutely. Not on the kids book. She's working with me on the horror book. She has done a few kids books, but she knows that this one has the potential to be really big. Man, I want to thank you for this conversation because it's really just reiterating to me like how blessed I am that these things have happened to me in my life. And
Mm-hmm.
um, I mean, part of me, the old self-loathing Chris, I hear him saying still to
Mm-hmm.
this day, you don't deserve it. But thanks to meditation and practices like loving kindness, I know better. You know, I can hear that voice and allow it to be there and not have to feed into it. Like Pema Chodron will say, you know, we are the sky. Everything else is just the weather passing by. So trying to keep that sky vibe going on.
Yeah, and you have the burden of the back injury right now, and that can throw some clouds in front of the sun real fast.
But it is what it is. I have to still live, and there was no part of me, honestly. I had already done one interview today, and then I had an hour call with somebody about something else, and a very busy work day, and my back's hurting, tired, and part of me was like, you should reschedule. And then the other part's like, no way, dude, you've already done it twice, you can't do it again. And I'm so glad that I didn't, because I feel honestly so much better than I did like coming into this call. I was super tired and just feeling rough, but I'll tell you, my back hasn't hurt the whole time we've talked. I feel calmer. Like, thank you, Kevin. This is I'm really grateful.
It's an inner peace podcast.
It works.
It does. I hope it does for all the listeners.
Yeah.
So as we wrap this puppy up, if somebody asked you, Chris, besides your books, what would be one book that you recommend for someone to read? What would it be? Would you go with Be Here Now?
It's a toss-up.
Conversations with God?
Here's the two I would go with, and they're two complete opposites. I would go with either Be Here Now, though you've got to be in the right, place to receive that book. It's accessible to anyone to read, but you got to be ripe for it to connect. I would either go with that, or I would go with Charles Bukowski's The Last Night of the Earth poems.
Wow.
Not considered a spiritual book whatsoever, but some of the most spiritual things I've ever read in my life are in that book and his other writings. But again, because I'm open to that experience of spirituality from not just traditionally spiritual things. So it's a toss-up. Be Here Now if the person's ripe, or Last Night of the Earth poems by Bukowski.
Right on. Chris, I am going to have to invite you back on at a later date.
Anytime.
Because there's a lot more that I want to have conversations about. I think this episode was, more about your path. But a lot of times I like to just have conversations. And you are familiar with the mystical side, and that's something that I like to talk about.
And this has been a really great experience. It's kind of little spark, a little flame going on in there. So I'm gonna have to dig maybe some Be Here Now out or something later today.
Or go listen to, oh my gosh, I just had Michael Cremo on. You might like that one. Dr. Robert Morse.
Oh, okay.
There's I got some episodes that'll might get you high.
I dig that, man. I'll have to check them out. I dig it for sure.
Get you high just off audio.
Well, like I said, man, within 10 seconds of coming on here, you calmed me down right away. So it's real. The podcast works. I'm a fan, Kevin. I appreciate it.
Right on, man. Thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure, and thank you for your time.
A reminder to all the listeners, if you're looking to take your meditation practice to the next level, be sure to download or stream my new meditation album, which is available on Spotify, Apple, and other streaming platforms. And let me know how you like it. Contact me on social media or email me through the website. If you're looking for all my work, be sure to log on to drreese.com. That's doctor spelled out. And I'll talk to you on the next episode.
Thanks for listening to Inner Peace with Dr. Reese. If this episode opened your heart, feel free to share on social media and tell your loved ones. Also, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next time, may peace be with you.